A good example of a durable is where you live. Yeah?
Well, I was wondering, so for like an airplane then, or a machine, wouldn't the use depreciate it though, not time as much? Or
Well, I think use depreciates it somewhat, but I think time depreciates it more, because the thing is the airplane gets way out of date, right? So like if you have the airplane sitting around and you're not using it, like, you know, in 15 years you're not gonna, it's not gonna be a very useful airplane to you anymore. You better use it while you still can. And it's true, a car wears down by use, but you know, I don't think you would ever like not use your car, except in the example that I gave you. I think that's a pretty unrealistic example on the problem set, because the truth is, like, you would think of it as a waste to have a car and not use it, because you know you're going to replace the car in 5 years, right? I don't think people very often don't use their car because they're afraid that they won't be able to use it in 6 months, right? So you can almost tell whether something's a durable by the language you use to describe it. If you would say, look, it's a waste that you have that and don't use it, then you know you're talking about something that's a durable. What's your name again?
Tejas.
Tejas. Well, I'm going to ask you the next question, Tejas. So, so what is a storable or an exhaustible? How do those differ from a durable?
So that would be something that's like oil or something like that, that like also lasts for a long period of time, but then it can be like it's depreciated by its use rather than.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So a storable or exhaustible is something that lasts basically forever, but you can only use it a finite number of times. And thus the use of it depreciates rather than the time. And that means that it's cheap to use it frequently, but it's expensive to use it at all. That is, what's scarce is not how much time you have to use it, but the number of times you can use it, right? So, if you think about, you know, the language you would use to describe a storable, think about, like, imagine you have your favorite candy, which has now gone off the market, and you've got it, you know, sitting at home. You only have a certain number of it, and you know you're never going to be able to get any more of it. If you, like, one day get really depressed and you know, eat all of it, you're going to say, wow, that was a real waste, right? Whereas with the plane, if you don't use the plane, you say it's a waste. With the storable, if you do use it, you say it's a waste. You see what I mean? So that's one, you know, key way to distinguish between storables and durables, is that durables are wasteful if you fail to use them in the time that you have to use them, whereas a storable is something where it's wasteful to use it during the long period you have to use it. So a good example of storable is a vacation, right? So you don't usually take many vacations a year, right? You probably take one, and you're willing to delay that vacation if you can get a better deal or go on a better vacation. We would think it was a waste to go on a vacation when you don't get a good deal on it. But if, you know, eventually you're going to take a vacation, right? For sure. Because otherwise you'll go nuts. Okay. So, all of this that I've been describing depends on context, but we can usually break down different factors into some which are storable and some which are more durable. And by factors, I mean things that are inputs to the process of production. So some classic example of durable factors are entry by firms into industries. We usually think it takes a long time for a company to get set up in a new industry or in a new country. Education is another thing that's very durable, right? So it's hard to be like educated today and uneducated tomorrow, and then educated again the next day after that, right? Your education is quite durable, right? Culture for societies tends to be very durable. You know, it's hard for a society to one day be Christian and the next day be Buddhist and the next day be Hindu, right? These things tend to last for a long period of time. Political, economic, and social institutions also tend to be quite durable. Less durable, but still quite durable, are machines. Experience on job, that is usually easier to get than education is in a quick period of time, but it does last for a fair while. Physical plants are another example. So like building a factory, you can dismantle the factory in a couple of years. It's not quite as durable as an education, but it is quite durable. Other examples are production procedures. You may be used to a certain way of producing. That lasts for quite a while. Your personal relationships with people you meet at college last for a while. Your memory hopefully lasts for a while, but maybe not as long as your education does. And then there are variable factors which are neither storable nor durable, which you can change very rapidly and are completely independent across time. So unskilled labor is a good example of that. Bulky raw materials are another good example. Advertising. If you advertise to consumers, the evidence we have suggests that that'll cause them to buy more for a week, but not much longer than that. So that's not very durable. It's also not very storable. Rentables are another good example. Even if something is like a big bulky factory, but if you can rent it for just one day and then leave immediately, it's not really a durable, right? So movies, now in the age of Netflix, are basically not durables anymore, whereas they used to be durables. It used to be you only wanted to buy the movie if you were going to watch it a lot of times over a long period, but now you can get the movie very easily for a very short period of time. Then we move over to things which are somewhat storable. So examples of those would be inventories of goods. So a company usually holds some amount of an inventory of a good, and if the demand for it goes up, then they sell all their inventory, they wear it down. If the demand for it goes down, they hold on and they grow their inventory, right? Favors that people owe you are somewhat storable, right? Maybe not that storable, maybe they'll forget that they owe you a favor, so you better use it within a reasonable period of time. But you probably can't draw on it a lot of times, even over a short period of time. Another good example would be the candy that I talked about. If there's a consumer good that you've stockpiled a bunch of, but that's not widely available, that is a storable for you. And then there's some things that are very storable. So for example, for the economy as a whole, there's just a certain amount of oil out there that can easily be accessed. There's a certain amount of gas in the ground and a certain amount of copper. Those, you can use what's there and you can't use any more than that. So those are very storable commodities. And then probably the most storable commodities are money and a great bottle of wine. So a great bottle of wine is actually probably better if you store it for a long period of time than if you don't. Right? Okay. So why does all of this matter? Well, the reason is that the more things you can adjust, the more reaction you make. So supply is more elastic when you can adjust more factors. And this is independent of whether the factor is a complement or a substitute for production. So an example of this is imagine that the price of gasoline rises, right? One thing that's a complement for the price of gasoline is how many trips you take, right? Something that's a substitute for the price of gasoline is having a greener car, right? If you can adjust either of those things, you're going to react more in terms of reducing the amount of gas that you purchase, right? So if you can adjust how many trips you take, you're going to reduce the quantity of gasoline by more than if you have to take the same amount of trips. If you can buy a greener car, you're going to reduce the amount of gasoline you purchase a lot more than if you have to keep the same old clunker that you had before, right? And this is called Le Chatelier's principle. It says that the more things you can adjust, the more elastic your reactions are. And this is sort of the driving force behind all the analysis of durations that we'll do in this class. So supply is more elastic over whatever length of time. It's easier to adjust things. If things are storable, it's easier to adjust them over short periods of time than over long periods of time. If things are durable, it's easier to adjust them over long periods of time than short periods of time, right? And what this means is that, and the key measurement of whether something is durable or storable is not just in an absolute sense, but relative to the market, right? So as I said, if you can rent some big factory for just one day, or if you could rent a chip that got put into your mind that made you educated, for just one day, well then it wouldn't really be durable education. You could just get education when you needed it and then give it back when you didn't need it anymore, right? And so if there's a market for something that you can easily trade in, then it's no longer durable. On the other hand, something is no longer storable if it's really easy to purchase it. So the candy example I gave, if you have your favorite candy but you can easily go and buy more of it at the store, or sell the stock that you currently have back to the store, right, then it's not really storable. And for this reason, I think it often tends to be the case, though not always, that given that it's often easier to sell back storables and buy them, it's often the case that durables are more important to companies than storables are. And this is going to be the main assumption we're going to make for most of the rest of the lecture. And it's important to remember that there are many cases when things are also storable, and in that case, everything I'm going to say is going to be exactly the opposite of what I'm going to say. Okay, so let's follow this assumption that things are durable, and this will allow us to define runs. So what are runs? Well, they're just lengths of time that you might be producing, right? So a short run is I'm expecting to produce this amount for 1 year, right? So the short run supply is what will be my average production for 1 year production of run of production. And each curve, the short run marginal cost curve, the short run supply curve, the long run marginal cost curve, the long run supply curve, corresponds to how much you would produce if the price was expected to last over that period of time. And the longer the duration or run of production, if things are durable, the more durable factors can be adjusted, right? And so we thus usually identify various different runs of production with which factors can be adjusted over that length of time. And a sort of loose classification of these is that in the short run, we can adjust things like unskilled labor, raw materials, etc. In the medium term, we can adjust the things that I said were moderately durable, like plant sizes, production methods, etc. And in the long term, we can adjust things which are very durable, such as the entry of new firms and the adjustment of the people who supply to those firms. So, for example, it's not just the case that if the demand for computers rises, that a lot more computer factories get built. It's also the case that a lot more mines for rare earths that are needed to produce those computers get opened, right? So it filters all the way back to the chain of supply in the long term. So these are heuristics. They're not fixed rules, and there are lots of counterexamples to these. So for example, I don't know if you noticed that immediately after Groupon came up, there were 1,000 other companies doing the exact same thing that Groupon does. So that indicates that entry into the market for doing something like Groupon is not very durable, because all these companies were able to immediately rush in after Groupon came up. Another example is that, goes in the opposite direction. Yeah, Eric.
So, durable is, earlier you said that it basically says a good that lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
It's stable for a long time. But does that necessarily mean it's difficult to acquire at first? Because in the example of firms, I think the Groupon, the Groupon